Welcome aboard the Themed Attraction Podcast, where we take you for a ride through the fascinating world of theme park design, that is. You've just set sail with us on a voyage of discovery and discussion with theme park industry masters of the craft. Well, thank you, Tony, so much for having us at your cabin. This is fantastic. Yeah, it's a beautiful, wonderful place.
What an amazing setting. I feel like I'm just going deeper into the rabbit hole of...
Well, you guys talked me into opening the house up. It's almost Christmas, and having the house open up here is just a Christmas-like house, you know.
Yeah,
and look at the setting. Christmas trees everywhere.
Well, we actually got to help decorate and put up the tree. And what a epic... I'm brought right back to my childhood in Bavaria, Germany, in the Black Forest, and some of these wonderful alpine, Tyrolean kind of chalets. But again, what an amazing day, starting off with waffles at
Belgian waffles.
We've got a little bit of a Storyland Studios annual tradition of kind of getting the whole team together for waffles up in the mountains here. And thanks so much for getting up early and joining us for breakfast, Tony, and getting a little bit of a unique nickel tour of Santa's Village, kind of a special place. And you were mentioning you think there might be some kind of umbilical cord.
I do, because the Hanks that built Santa's Village back, it opened 2 months before Disneyland, and they live right across the street. And this was built in 1947. So that's 7 years before Santa's Village. So they had to look at it for 7 years. So I'm just thinking it had to rub off, because this looks Tyrolean and Santa Claus-like and gingerbread house.
Mm-hmm.
Name it. You know.
I can see the original source of inspiration. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned too, like there's some Disney connection with.
At Santa's Village, several of the original Imagineers, before there was a Disneyland, before there was anything called Imagineering, worked on the buildings there. And because of the uniqueness of those buildings, they were hired to design the Mickey Mouse Club sets for the weekly television series. So if you think of that Friday afternoon Mickey Mouse Clubhouse,
that's right.
It looks a lot like the Santa's Village, and that was Harriet Burns, who I worked with years and years and years, and she was in the model shop and on many of the TV shows where Walt is taking you through Imagineering.
Wow.
Yeah. That's not your only history at Santa's Village. I understand you've trespassed there before. And
well, this cabin is walking distance from Santa's Village. And we did, and we broke in, and there were like hermits that were living in the abandoned buildings, all these gingerbread houses and stuff. And there was this creepy maze, like Tim Burton had built it. It was based on Alice in Wonderland, and it was all in ruins. And so I had one of those little
Alice
tiny...
in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had a tiny flashlight, on your keychain, and I'm in there, and I stepped on a piece of glass that cracked and broke. And this guy that looked like out of a horror movie came roaring out of nowhere and says, "What is it about no trespassing that you don't understand?" There were no teeth, and I figured this is it. This is the end of it. So I got a picture of that.
yeah, that's great.
Of the hobo running out at you?
No, but of me just about to go in. Wow. Yeah.
And sitting next to me is Michael Mulligan, one of our spatial storytellers at Storyland Studios.
Yep.
And you guys have known each other for a little bit, right?
A while. Through
his brother knows everybody in the world.
Yeah,
that's
Mulligan.
true.
And so one way or another, I'm going to meet everyone through Jimmy. And Michael was one of the first, of course. So,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Glad I'm not the last.
And we had the pleasure of having you come through Storyland Studios a few minutes ago and check out our little shop.
Yeah, it was great. All the way from the giant, dragon on the top of the roof, and you can build just about anything there.
Yeah.
Well, it was an honor having you darken our door.
It's fun to see it.
Well, I first met you, Tony. I'm sure you don't remember this, but it was around the Westcott 2.0 rollout.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember catching the bug for the idea of in-park hotels and the notion that you might get to spend the night in the magic and fall asleep, enter that REM dream pattern, wake up and still be in the rabbit hole
and never leave.
And what are your thoughts on, of all the projects that stayed in Blue Sky Land or the Disneyland that never was? I was curious what your thoughts on Westcott, now that we're looking at a Star Wars hotel, the whole idea of a theme park experience going beyond just that 8-hour, theme park day. Do you think that's still
You got
legs?
3 hours for this? No, going back to Westcott,
take it.
I think Westcott would have, its big thing would have been putting you in the park 24 hours a day. In fact, even if I was in charge now, I would try to convert World Showcase in Epcot into the same thing. The park down there needs a 24-hour space.
Yeah.
It's a, we're almost, you'd have to say, as big as any major city with the number of people that are there on any day. And the city doesn't go, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, New York has come to the end of its normal operation. We hope that you had fun. Now get out. So, I mean, the idea of if you want to walk out into a park and you've got your night slippers on and, you just want to stroll romantically around while they're washing the streets down, so what? That would be great. So that whole thing, I was really disappointed. But you have to go back to when it's an idea that doesn't have a precedent. And we were able in '92 to open the hotel at the front of Disneyland Paris. And it was a fight all the way to get that accepted. Eddie Sato was the designer, and I was the overall lead on it. And we literally had to fight off architects that were world-renowned who couldn't even conceive that anyone would want to stay in a theme park. And I said, everyone on the property wants to stay in a theme park. That's why they're coming to us. They don't want to stay in a regular hotel.
Yeah.
If they don't, the only reason they're forced into that is it's economics. But if they have enough money, everybody is going to want to be as close to what it is they're paying to see. And we did a lot of, test group studies, and I know from what we got out of that, they can manipulate in any way, because we had 100% of our guests wanting it when we conducted it, and 100% of the guests not wanting it when the people who were, adamantly against it conducted it. Funny how it works. So, but anyway, we built that. And of course, that opened in '92, and it worked right away. People weren't standing in their underwear looking into Disneyland. They weren't
Flash
calling.
in Town Square.
We were doing a test of a parade at midnight. That isn't open yet. No, they don't call the desk and say we can't sleep. They go, oh my God, we got to see the preview.
Yeah.
We snuck a look at that. And of course, Michael Jackson ended up living in that hotel for a year almost.
Wow.
At one point in time. So it broke down a barrier that, unfortunately, when we were struggling to convince people that living in Westcott would be an amazing thing, it didn't get done. But I kind of look at Las Vegas and what happened in Las Vegas shortly after that. It looks like somebody was looking at what we were doing. Because there sure is a lot of reflections. You can't stay at the Riviera, and all those, those are all gone, and it's the Sands, the Tropicana, all of that old Frank Sinatra style Vegas has been replaced, with Venetian canals and Parisian towers and whatnot. So. And it's fun. It's a mishmash, but it really is fun. So I'm convinced it would have worked, and it would have been very cool.
Yeah, there is a magical urbane quality to walking around the World Showcase Lagoon at night. It does remind me of walking around Singapore.
Well, how many times have you gotten in from the West Coast at 11 at night, and there's nothing to do?
Yep.
Everything's closed. You're on West Coast time, so it's, what is that, 8 or 9? 8, and you go, I'm wired, I want to,
ready to go.
It's closed up, everything is closed up, you're off to Steak and Shake, I guess,
Cracker
I've
Barrel.
done that.
Well, I love Steak and Shake. It's my go-to place.
Frisco Burgers. Yeah.
Especially now that they've got magic, things going on all the restaurants. So unless you pre-booked, you're not going to get a meal.
Well, of all those Neverlands, or Never Yet Lands, do you have a favorite one that got away, or that really...
I think Discovery Bay was way ahead of its time. It came, unfortunately, after... It was timed to coincide with a film called Island at the Top of the World, which was rumored to be the next 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And so we were all so excited that the company was turning back to adventure, away from kind of comedies, and doing something with some power and longevity. And we developed a series for television that we felt would roll right in, called the Discovery Bay Chronicles. We actually did a trailer for that, that's floating out on the internet, I think, around, in which there'd be 10 episodes, and you'd meet all the different players that would end up having some relationship to an attraction or a ride or something that you do there. And we literally got about 4 of those really conceptualized so that we could build the ride kind of in advance of telling the story. And it was kind of developing IP off of a synergistic relationship with a park, rather than having to take IP and then develop a ride around that. The two things were kind of, so you could build sets for the movie that would go to the park, and vice versa. You could put things in the park that could be used maybe in the movie, you know. And so the budgets for both things, our thought would be extraordinarily higher than you could do for a series. But the movie came out, it was not successful, and so rather than saying we did a rather unsuccessful and not very well done steampunk film, it was sort of like nobody wants steampunk. That was there was nothing wrong with the movie, it's just nobody likes steampunk. So that sort of put that in the bed for a long time. But management changes and various other things occur in companies, so we were able to sneak a lot of the projects developed for Discovery Bay into probably the most obvious is in Disney Sea, which was designed, some of it for Disney Long Beach Sea.
That was the project that convinced me to graduate film school and go to work for the Walt Disney Company. It was about the week that was announced. The Long Beach project.
We were dead serious. I mean, we had the Queen Mary. It had been purchased by Disney, or it was in our control, and we developed that whole bay. But you know, again, you're dealing with so many commissions and so many entities from the naval and whatnot. I don't think you could have ever plowed through. You have to, like when we did Paris, the government was so eager to have that project on the east side of the city. Each time there's a war in Europe, they march in from the east and destroy everything in their way to the city of Paris. So while the west, with whereas Versailles and all of that is developed, it's kind of like the Westwood of LA area. The east side just gets plowed under and have been nothing but farming. So Disney came in with the idea of developing that in the city, or the what do you call it, the country, and actually all of Europe. Everybody was in sync. We had cooperation from the government to build the tunnel that was coming in from England all the way. Yeah, the tunnel. It actually drops people off at our front door, and things like that, and the highway, and all of the adjustments that were made.
All the stuff that we're still waiting for in Anaheim.
Yeah, exactly.
Still don't have.
You've got to like dot your I's and cross your T's that they aren't going to come back on you, well, now we've changed our mind. So all of those things were in place, and we went through a horrible economic time right after that park opened, but those kind of things would have never gotten put in place. And now that they are, the fact that you can get up in the Pancras Hotel in the Waterloo station and be at our gate in 2 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy, so.
Yeah, Lori and I were having dinner one night at the train station.
Yeah.
We could be at the front door because of Paris.
Set your clock.
That is a fabulous hotel, by the way, that Pancras.
So we were talking a little earlier about travel. You're giving me some tips on where I should go in Ireland, and so
England.
England. Yeah,
I know more about England than Ireland, but Ireland's beautiful.
Well, so that your travels have informed so much of, I'm sure, what the art that you've created over the years. Is there a connection to any park that Tom Morris? When we talked to him, he could point to some of the buildings that he inspired him to build certain things in the parks. How about you? Any travel related connections you brought back?
Yeah, I mean, I never got to Europe until I graduated from high school, or college, excuse me, and was working at Disney and had enough money that we could afford to go over there. But by then, I think I was brought up on an era of film and motion picture and things that, I would see things, not just in Disney movies or anything, but I would just build a rapport, whatever, losing words here. A rapport, I guess that's a word, isn't it?
A repertoire.
A repertoire of images and things that would stick in my head. In particular, I think the castle that Tom worked on in Paris and did the final development of it. But when we started, I said, Tom, it's got to appear that it's up on a hill. And my clock is going off.
Yeah, that's great. No,
okay?
That's okay.
Okay.
We're in Tony Baxter's cabin, so there's a clock.
Grandfather clock that is disturbing me right now. Anyway, so we had this castle, and every castle at Disneyland is on the flat.
Yeah.
And castles in all of the stories, and you look at the end of Snow White, even Sleeping Beauty too. I was going to say that they both have a castle that's up on a precipice.
Mm-hmm.
So to have these on the flat, it was always taking something away. But then you face, codes like we have the ADA handicap code now that requires a certain steepness. So how do you do that and account for all the things we allow everybody to get in, but still create the illusion that it's up on a hill? So I said to Tom, we're going to figure out how to do this. So about a third of that castle is giving your eye the opinion that you're looking at rockwork, and that the castle actually starts at a higher level. And we put a fire-breathing dragon inside that piece that's down there. And so the whole thing works extremely well at delivering not just the facility, but delivering something that lives up to kind of these higher standards that came to me through film.
Yeah.
I mean, getting to see the real place is terrific. And I kind of base a lot of things now in the modern times on the Harry Potter factor. How close does this extremely charming village look like what Stuart Craig was able to do art direction-wise with the Harry Potter films? And you can find that. But the brilliance of his films is that he was able to put it all together in one fantastic view where all these little fine details that you can search all over Europe to explore and find, but you've got it all put together in that film. So I think I kind of came to this with this higher expectation. So it was visiting Europe was a chance to sort of check it off and see if it was as good as you thought it would be, find things that might be better, and you could erase them the film one and say, now I have a real one that's even of a higher, or in a few wonderful cases, finding something that you knew in film and actually getting to stay in it or visit it in real life. That's another fabulous thing. Yeah.
Well, there's certainly an element of, I've seen the real thing, and I've now, every artist sits down to, your Van Goghs are, I'm going to paint reality, but I'm going to paint reality as it feels.
Yeah, exactly. Get the emotional thing that hits you there. And it's funny how that happens. I was just driving along, minding my own business in England, and I looked off, and there was just this amazing structure. It was like a Gothic nightmare of a building, and I said, I'm going to go over and find what that is. And I drive over there, and lo and behold, it's some kind of a country inn. So I go in, the price was reasonable. And so I'm checking in and carrying my luggage up the stairs, and the guy says, oh, by the way, would you be interested in the ghost tour tonight? And I said, ghost tour? Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So I come down, and there's an old butler that does the tours, and he's shining this big, battery lamp up on the building, and it's all in black and white now. And he goes, some of you might recognize this building. It was used in Robert Wise's classic film, The Haunting. And I just got chills down my back. I was already booked and staying in a thing that since I was like 8 years old is like the greatest Gothic horror movie ever. I'm now living in it. Yeah. And then he says, oh, and by the way, it was also used for Disney's Watcher in the Woods. Oh. And so double. Double. So those are like wonderful moments where something that you've only been able to visualize on a flat screen and in an emotional sense, because I think that's what movies do for these places is when he said this was used in The Haunting, and I get that goosebump moment, it's because of all the things it means to me in that movie and that I was actually there. So sometimes these things can be extended a lot by what we get delivered emotionally. And that's why theme parks work, I think is because you're in them with your family or friends and whatnot, and there's a greater extension of it having an emotional connection. Especially if it's got an attraction or a piece of music. Yeah. Like when you look at the front of Small World, it looks like any 1960s World Fair building, but then when you hear tick-tock, tick-tock, and you go, I'm here, I'm really here, this is really where this is, and it lives here, and today, I am one with it, so it takes on a higher thing.
Yeah, it strikes me, Tony, you've been part of the industry for a long time, and there's I think a fair contingent of at least the fan community that would kind of trust you as kind of a guardian of the flame, if you will, and a lot of people are really kind of adverse to change and tend to kind of have an allergic reaction to kind of whatever is going on. They're almost nervous whenever they see construction walls going up because they're afraid of what's getting taken away from Walt's Park. And it just strikes me, especially the first time I went to Disneyland, actually construction walls were up around Fantasyland, and you were doing New Fantasyland.
Yeah.
And, it strikes me the radical upgrade from Walt's original 2D plywood painted tournament tent Fantasyland to a taste of your cabin here, Fantasyland. Do you see kind of a pretty positive arc of progress in terms of the level of immersion and quality, or are you a doom and gloomer?
No, I'm not a doom and gloomer. Right now, my big crusade is go and see Mary Poppins Returns.
Yes. Yes.
And don't carry into it all your can't top Julie Andrews, can't do that. Just enjoy a really, really great motion picture. But each one of these things, you have a scale you've got to balance, because you don't want to make Disneyland no longer friendly for the people that grew up with it, but you've got to give a reason for people that didn't grow up with it to grow up with it. And it has to be their era. So the big thing I went through was with Star Wars. And in 1977 and all the way up into the 80s, Disney was not scoring with kids on the cinema. And so you were in danger of building a group that did not grow up with Walt Disney movies, the way that Peter Pan and Sleeping Beauty and 20,000 Leagues were part of my, my vision for what Disneyland should be. But now you had Robin Hood and Fox and the Hounds, and here is Star Wars, and then there's E.T., and then there's Indiana Jones. Yeah. And to walk into management that had produced those things. And this was a thing that had to be resolved at the studio, whether we were going to go after George Lucas becoming a part of the company or go after Steven Spielberg. And that got resolved very quickly because Steven is so highly connected with Universal. So it was obviously George. But that was a hard move for not just the management at the studio that had passed on Star Wars, but it was hard for the visitors who saw the very first, when that wall went up, an Adventure Through Inner Space, which I worked as a ride operator for centuries. Man, had his own two eyes. So I know that ride. And I loved that ride, but it was a 60s ride. It was a psychedelic ride with a story. So you could go to San Francisco and see a light show rock concert with lasers that was unconstructed, or you could come to Disneyland and ride Adventure Through Inner Space, and they both gave you the same head trip. But one was contexted, the other was not. So it was time for that to go. Its era was over, but you had a whole generation that it was a part of their coming of age. So
first kisses.
A lot of first kisses in that one.
Even more than everything you can imagine. Yeah, right. So here you had that.
There's cameras installed.
And then you had the doom and gloom that Disney has never gone outside their own ability to create content. Never. And now they're buying content from the outside. Yeah. So that was number two. But then on the other side, you had kids that were weaned on Star Wars, like that was their Peter Pan and Davy Crockett. Yeah. And when we put the sign up that Star Wars is coming, it was like the first new Star Wars product in 10 years. Yeah, right. 10 years. So what the company didn't realize, they were attending to the doom and gloom and oh my God and all that. They didn't realize that the anticipation for a new Star Wars product after 10 years in one theater, essentially in the entire world. They didn't know how to handle that. And so we had a mass meeting the day it opened. I remember the line was 5 hours long and all the way down Main Street and out the gate. And they decided to leave Disneyland open for 72 hours, 3 days. And they never closed. And you could just do whatever you wanted to do, get your hand stamped and come back. And so everyone, even though they had to wait in line 5 hours, they go, hey, this is a great deal. We're sending people home to go to bed, and they come back and break us. And so everyone was having a ball with it. And because, in the end, we've got a 5-minute experience, and people are waiting 5 hours to have it. How are they going to react? And you couldn't believe how they reacted. They'd never experienced a simulator. It was the first time ever a simulator had been put in a public environment. In fact, Entertainment Weekly, I think, voted it the 22nd greatest entertainment concept from the 20th century, and that was during the millennium when they were trying to evaluate all the. Yeah. Anyway, so you had this incredible demand on that, and the people that were of the two other categories of like, you know, first time we've had to buy, and the I love my people mover people that, you know, can't have change. You know, you'd start to hear that, well, it's actually better than I thought it was going to be. You know, I actually kind of like it, you know. And, you know, my feeling that guides me on from that one on, because I've had a lot of these, and most of them have been for the better, you have to say inside your own mind and be honest with yourself rather than egocentric about it. Because a lot of people can believe everything they do is better than everyone else. Mm-hmm. But you have to say, is what we have planned for this space going to be a better experience than what we're taking down? And if you can't be honest with yourself, you have to have someone on your team that's honest and saying, it's not good enough. This is not better than what was there before. Mm-hmm. And I think the only time I came close to feeling the other way was with Winnie the Pooh. Eddie Sato had the good fortune to do the one in Tokyo where they spent a considerable amount of money, a lot. I mean, what we'd call an e-ticket. And it's a great ride. It's free, one of the very first free-ranging vehicle things, and it bounces and it does amazing things.
It's an e-ticket.
Yeah, but we had another era and a time where they said the audience is pre-school, and these kids don't know what an e-ticket is. They just want to see Winnie the Pooh, so let's just do the least we can. But you had a Country Bear Jamboree, and its only fault was it was old and tired, and everyone would say, oh, I love those bears, but we never go on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it had run from 2 theaters that were full all the time to 1 theater that was half full, and, you know, then shortened hours where it opens at noon and it closes at 6 and stuff like that. So, you know, those, I can't fight that. That's management side that says we can't afford to have a facility, you know, performing that way in our park. We need everything we have running at maximum because we have too many lines. So in that case, I felt like we should have given more to make it equal to the Country Bear. But they are right in a way that for a 6-year-old, it's wonderful. Yeah. You know, I saw Pooh, I saw Piglet, and that isn't the iconology that older people are at Disneyland to enjoy. So I understand that. But in my head, I don't have the satisfaction. A similar one was the Treehouse, going from 1960 Swiss Family Robinson, mythology, where my age, you grew up with that, you know, Kevin Corcoran and that. And it's like, yep, there's the Treehouse. I remember when I used to go on it. You know, I'm glad it's there. And so it had dropped down to 200 people an hour were going up that tree. And so they were going to take it out and reapportion the space to use for merchandise or something like that. And because it has a fairly heavy rehab schedule on that tree, because those are real branches and they have to be groomed and cared for a lot. Individual leaves. And so it was on the extinction list, I think. And then I was so excited when we saw a preview of the movie Tarzan, and it had a treehouse in it, and so I convinced management to give us the money they would have normally spent for a parade or a marketing event at the Disneyland Park to herald the latest animation. So we got the money as long as we could open it the day that the movie came out. And we beat it by 1 day, actually. And the attendance went from 200 an hour to 900 an hour. Yeah. Now, I always find a way to make sure I'm going to be able to succeed on stuff like that. So I made sure that the new entrance was smack dab in the middle of the walkway.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you approach it, it's not like over there hidden behind the philodendrons. Yeah. It is right there. So
if you're not paying attention, you're going to walk up those stairs.
You're going up the tree.
That was half of the 900, though.
Yeah, but in that one, there were a lot of people that the mythology of.
By the way, a really great portal between New Orleans Square and Adventureland.
Well, that was the other thing. We tried a screen.
Yeah.
We built a screen there which had never been there before, and
really
so
adds
that
to the
was,
immersiveness of Adventureland.
And I'd argue that for everyone that grew up, and I hear it from all my friends because they love the Swiss Family story. And one of my friends who's a basketball player just bought the organ that was on sale at the pipe organ.
Oh yeah.
And it was just a wooden prop, all made out of
All you got to do is put a CD player in there with
That's
that.
What was in there.
It works just fine.
It was a chip. That was what was in it. Anyway, so yeah, so that one's one where, but kids that grew up with Tarzan, and if you look at the broader thing, I think there's more versions of Tarzan that keep it universal than Swiss Family, which is a one-off, where Tarzan has come back generationally over and over and over again. So, those are hard decisions, but, I feel all in all, my favorite comment when you're done is from a guest, and I've heard it twice. Wow. It looks like they just pulled down some of the plants and leaves, and that this was here all along.
Yeah.
Then that's the way of the reverse of that is they didn't scar Disneyland by putting in something that is wrecks the ambiance.
Well, that's also what is so fascinating about that 1994 remake of Adventureland, adding Indiana Jones, cutting the Jungle River down, and all of that put together makes that not only the busiest land of the park, but it's just so active and full of plenty of things to do.
And they've done a lot in this last 3 months in terms of. I keep saying they're going to spoil it. I know by opening it up more and all that, but they've to get rid of a lot of the strollers and baby carriages and stuff. They put seating into what used to be merchandise, and that is something Disney never does. Is takes merchandise.
I was shocked.
We all were, and it's in a good
shock
way.
and awe.
It's so good, and now they're reopening the terrace patio, so you can just go in there and relax and sit down, and they put a new palm tree in over by the Bengal barbecue, and so I'm really happy with. It's the tiniest land in Disneyland, and it's very congested with things to do. 2 of our key rides that you must do are in that land. So, it's an ongoing challenge, and they're of course aware they're going to have huge crowds this summer with the Star Wars. So, they're doing a lot to prepare for being able to move people through. I think going back for a minute on Fantasyland, that was Walt Disney. It was all of the stories that I grew up with was in Fantasyland, but. In '83, it had reached a point where it really did look tired and moldy, and so we had to make this call. And we were all gung ho young guys, and there were a couple of statesmen like Ken Anderson, who was a licensed architect and designed so many animated films, the look of them, and he was still there working with us and letting the young Turks try their way and all that. And then one night we were bullied, let's go down after work tonight and check it out. They bulldozed today, so we'll see what's there. And we went into Fantasyland. It was all dirt. And the buildings were still there, but the facades, some of them had been dropped, and they were laying in the dirt and all that. And there were strands of lights.
Including Ivan Earl designed facades.
Yes.
That I would be nervous about demoing.
Well, in that day, too, they didn't save anything. They felt it was important to destroy it all so that it didn't fall into the wrong hands. But anyway,
this belongs in a museum.
We got down there, and it was just about dark, and then dark signaled the lighting to go on, and all the strands of popcorn lights that were along, like the Mickey Mouse Theater, they were just hanging, haphazardly, like drooped off and they went blink, on. And I remember Tom Morris and I we just looked at each other and going, what have we done? And that was really scary.
Yeah, your thought Thanos moment.
We just destroyed Disneyland.
Yes, the
heart and soul.
This is the heart where you immediately play back all the days as a 5-year-old that you stood in line and waited for this, and looked at that beautiful Ivan Earl-ish mural, and imagined yourself along the trail that it showed the trail of the ride, and that was just and it just really stabbed into your heart that moment that how are we going to do this? It
better be
no
good.
pressure. No pressure.
Well, I do remember going on the Skyway over that. I think my dad took me on my 10th birthday, and I remember thinking, oh, we'll go on Peter Pan next. And I didn't know that it was closed. And flew over and looked down. And went, oh no!
At least we let you fly over.
I know.
That was fun. I remember we would ride that ride just to see how it looked from up there. We would imagine what people who were riding that were thinking about what we were doing.
That's right.
And sometimes we'd say, we better take that mess out over there because you really see it from the Skyway.
Well, Tony, we had a great time with Tom Morris talking about the opportunity he had to be kind of an overall creative director for an entire Magic Kingdom Castle Park with Hong Kong Disneyland. And prior to that, of course, you had a similar role for Disneyland Paris. I mean, what was that like? I mean, kind of, was that daunting to say the least?
Well, it's funny, when the company gives you the sense that you're supported, then those things are not as horrific. And in the first 10 years of Michael Eisner's leadership with Frank Wells, I don't think I was ever feeling more that I was on the right page. And the relationship they allowed us to have with them was front door open all the time. So I could go over there, and the only thing that was terrific was Michael's assistant would say, he's in a really bad mood. I don't think you want to go in there today. And she would then say, how about tomorrow? Or she'd say, I'll call you when. And then you'd go right in and solve a problem right there. I mean, he'd say, what is it? And I'd say it, and he goes, Frank, he'd scream, and Frank Wells would come in. He goes, and then he would parrot. So, and he'd go, did I get it right? As he tells Frank, da-da-da-da-da. Did I get it right? Yes. And then he goes, and then Frank said, sounds like it's a good idea to me. Great, go do it, and you leave. And so you get a tremendous sense.
Assistant as a facilitator, not as a bouncer.
Yeah,
Yes.
and you definitely then went out of there feeling, that you're charged with a task that they support you doing.
Yeah.
As soon as you undermine that and you find yourself wondering what they're going to think, and am I going to get in trouble if I do this? And I know their real agenda is that, but I have a more holistic, a look at it here. And you start second guessing how things are going to go down. You're in trouble. It's like, management became very conservative at the parks during the early 90s, I think. And one thing after another was closing, and they were taking things out like Cascade Peak in Frontierland. And I went on a big campaign to keep that, and we were talking multiples of money to keep it versus bulldoze, and I was too passionate without the knowledge that I had backing from the people I was arguing with. And what happens then when you leave the room, they go, do we have to put up with him all the time? I mean, it's just yak, and when you're on your roll and you're thinking everyone thinks the way I do, and you don't know for sure that you've got someone watching your back, then you can get in trouble. And the other parallel to that I use is having a good solid bank account. You can make a loan if you have a lot of money in the bank. You can't make a loan if you don't have very much money. So if you
Change
stick
in your
your
pocket.
mouth, if you stick your mouth out and say something, you better have when you leave the room and you've got a big bank account, they're going, he's never been wrong. And I know this sounds like something we shouldn't do, but I'm really worried that if we don't follow it, we're going to be in trouble. And that's because you have this, cadre of achievements that, keep you in that point. But as soon as they start to say, anyone can do what he does, why are we putting up with this? Then you've got nothing in the bank account. And any kind of a negative comment like that, they go, geez. So-and-so will come in here and he'll go, I'll do it, anything. Oh, yeah, that sounds great. Because they want the job. And so you've got a million people waiting. That's the sad thing about this business. It's tremendously desirable. So there's a million people waiting to have that opportunity. And the last thing they're going to do with no bank account is say, well, I have a better idea.
Well, along those lines, I've got to ask you, because one of the first projects we kind of indirectly collaborated on was a humble little Olympics pool replacement project for the Disneyland Hotel. I worked a little more closely with John Stone. But, this, again, it was like a nothing little project. We had a pool that was basically in the way of downtown Disney's now shuttered AMC cinema. But the idea was to, absorb that space into downtown Disney to kind of create that bridge to the Disney Hotel. So we, of course, had to replace the pool, but the budget that was given from on high wisely was this replacement rectangular Olympic-sized pool budget. So, the idea of taking the cards that you've been dealt, the budget at hand, not limiting creativity or passion, but, kind of rummaging through the parade float warehouses, finding the Peter Pan boat, and carving, storyboarding this narrative of, climbing Misty Mountains
in people's backyards instead of going with a whole crew out there at Disneyland.
Just the tender love and care of actually letting kids be a Lost Boy and climbing the Misty Mountains and sliding down Crocodile Creek and jumping in the Mermaid Lagoon. That was amazing for me to understand the power of passion and imagination, despite not really
you
having...
brought up a name there, John Stone, who was a
what
genius.
A talent.
He was... a mixed bag, but in terms of talent, there was no one that had as many skills in one person. I mean, he could build a model,
jack of all trades.
He could do architectural drawings. He could do renderings.
Reminds me of you, Michael.
Actually, I was going to say the same thing.
Michael's one of those kind of guys.
Too much credit.
Yeah.
Well, again, the reason I was bringing that up, was there ever a moment in time where you said yes to something you should have said no to, like Tomorrowland 98?
We had done Indiana Jones, which had a reasonable scale budget, and it came in on budget, and everyone was really happy. I remember I was told that for that budget, we'd have to increase Disneyland's attendance 1 million people. And the attendance the year Disneyland opened, Indy went up by 3 million people. Wow. Which tells you something. You could say, well, a lot of people say it was the last year of the electrical parade, and there was introduction of passports and things. But passports had been around many years. There was no reason to buy a passport. The reason people bought passports is because they wanted to go on Indy over and over again. And the hotel increased attendances around your property there, went up like 15, 20%. So it showed that there was a demand for investing at that Pirates of the Caribbean level again. And so here's where the mistake that I made was, the next thing I was given was Tomorrowland. And I agreed that we were given the same budget as Indy, but the difference was it was a land,
right,
not a ride. And if I had the people behind me to back me, and I had the big account budget, I kind of had a pretty good budget, but I drank the Kool-Aid a little bit and said, I'll do the whole land for the same price. I should have walked in and said, we can give you one incredibly good e-ticket ride. So do you want to take out the carousel? Do you want to take out whatever? And we're going to put in a big Indy quality Tomorrowland ride. And the attitude was, the whole land needs to be refreshed. We can't focus the money on one thing. So we divided the Indy quantity of money into 4 pockets. So we had the carousel becoming Innoventions, where a lot of the cost was defrayed by sponsorship. We had Rocket Rods, it was going to be a design version of the East Coast test track, which General Motors showed how they test their vehicles. And then in California, we're going to show how you design vehicles. So we were going to let you ride on a wireframe, uncompleted design, and then you'd enter the design facility at the end of the ride and finish the design. And GM was hot on it because it was going to give them beta testing for shapes and colors and things that the audience reacted to. And then you'd see these wireframes running all over Disneyland on the track. So that was another. And then we had the 3D movie, which the theater had to be retrofitted for the movement of the seats. So that was a big cost in that one. And the final fourth was for the whole area development, everything. And the first thing that happened is General Motors backed out. And so it went from a reasonable budget for that to nothing. And then we couldn't get any sponsors in Innoventions that would be interesting to see. So instead of having Apple and Sony and...
It was Kaiser.
It was Kaiser Permanente and Honeywell Thermostat.
Some home builder.
And SAP business management systems. And
but honestly, as soon as I went searching for my own thermostat and I saw Honeywell,
Honeywell.
I really did. I thought, I remember this from Innoventions.
Well, people don't realize that my generation grew up with AT&T or Bell. Ooh, let's go on Bell. Let's go on Monsanto. Who would know what Monsanto is? I can't ever lose that name because Monsanto's Adventure Through Inner Space and Monsanto's Home of Tomorrow and all that. And the Goodyear People Mover and the General Electric Carousel of Progress. I mean, those are drummed into a whole generation. And I miss that because everything now is instantaneous marketing budgets for how many hits you can get on the net. So we lost that. Honey was like opening a film that had been running for years in Florida. So there was the Disnoids, they go to all our parks. So they had seen that. That was news 5 years before. So opening Honey had no, sale on it. And I think in the end, I could look back and say, I kind of should have known that going in. And because you can't put a sign up that says, "Please forgive that we only spent about a quarter."
Yeah.
We should have
You
spent.
can't
Yeah.
do
There's
that.
no
unlimited budget.
a hubris disclaimer.
Yeah, but you're kind of like, I can do it. And we've got to staff great people like John Stone and
Us.
Bruce Gordon, and we'll all roll up our sleeves and we'll build this. We took old monorail cars and people mover cars and put them in the pre-show to
Yeah, I
rock
loved
rides.
that, by the way.
They were
That was
all
really
lit in
cool.
black light, like wireframe designs. And a guy did a Circle Vision movie for 1/15 of what they normally cost, and we ran that as a loop in the queue line for that. So I mean, in our minds, we were doing really good on what we were given, but the public is coming through the gate to see an Indiana Jones or a Pirates of the Caribbean. So, Walt said you often need a failure, and I think for me, I wish it could have been more successful. I wish if we'd gotten the budget from General Motors, I know Rocket Rods would have been a home run, because the track, we didn't have the money to profile the track and make it take the
Turns,
curves and all that. So, it was, that was it. For a while, everyone loved it. It looked really spangly at night and all that. And then people started saying, I miss the People Mover. I miss this. I miss that. And Honey I'm tired of Honey. Movies. The other thing that's happening, movies are now a regular thing to see them in IMAX 3D and beautiful leather chairs and with hot dogs and things served to you.
You've got that downstairs,
Yeah.
right? You're 30.
So, the day
theater.
when you went to Disneyland to see a 20-minute 3D movie in 70 millimeter, that was an amazing thing. But by the time Honey opened, yawn, So, and we now have filled all those theaters with, promos, mostly for the next
Star
Disney
Wars
film.
thing or something.
So you end up with, there wasn't much that was at that caliber of fulfilling guest expectations. And so that's why I say the important thing out of this, the lesson is when you start, you have to be confident in your mind that what is coming will be better than what left. And that's a very difficult thing to do. However, that being said, when we did all that, America Sings had been gone a long time, and I think the Bell Telephone film was limping on its last legs, American Journeys.
Yeah,
And so, there wasn't much going on. There was a lot of things closed, and the 3D theater, I don't think, was... Captain EO might have been on its last legs. So, it needed something, but it needed something that was fourfold more than what we were able to do.
Right.
So I think they get that now, because I know the look and the quantity of expense they're putting into things like a Pandora and Studio Tour and the Star Wars projects out here and in Florida, and incredible. The Cars Land, incredible.
Yeah.
They spent the right amount, so I think it wasn't. It wasn't
Even
in
New
one
Fantasyland,
person's
they never-
court. Everyone has learned that. Everyone has learned that, and I don't think we'd ever do that again. Even Universal has learned that.
Yeah.
The Harry Potter projects are a good evidence of that.
Yep.
You've got to put a certain amount in to live up to the expectations.
Yeah.
I've got to ask the question. I mean, kind of, because coming on the heels of that was California Adventure, and after having worked on kind of the Westcott 2.0 proposal,
Yeah.
Disney Seas, were you just busy doing other things, or were you
No,
like,
I think,
no thanks?
No. I wasn't a no thanks. It was I was clearly aligned with the Westcott and the Disney Sea project, and the mandate for California Adventure, going back to day one, was to conceptualize an entirely different kind of a project that wasn't in that league. It was a new, if you want to call it, a half-priced park, and its numbers and everything were based on it would perform well if it did half of what Disneyland did. So everything was sort of prorated on that, and so the goal was that it would be successful. It did that. It didn't do that. It didn't even do half of Disneyland. So the realization very shortly was we're going to have to pump it up, and I think everyone would agree that what they've been able to do in there has brought it right into a parallel with Disneyland. Yeah. That being said, I think it's always stronger if you design the right thing to begin with, rather than having to go in and work with retrofitting something that's already built to be something else. Having to try and say, well, how could we salvage this part but take out that's not working? And there's more money in doing that too than in building it right. You spend a lot more to get the same value.
Yeah.
from a fan's perspective, it's easy to look at it seemed like at least a decade there of Disney management's philosophy of doing these half-day parks, from Disney MGM Studios, Walt Disney Studios Paris, even a California Adventure, where the idea is open up a kind of something that'll drive some incremental attendance, but knowing that there's hopefully the capacity to then
and I think we're completely out of
recapitalize.
that era. But I think that, again, going back to this idea of on a grand scale, it could be a park level, but in a ride situation, let's say the limo ride, which was in California Adventure, had to be like one of the least successful attractions ever done, and maybe the shortest operated ride ever done. That's kind of a major dark ride building. Maybe 6 months or a year, I can't remember.
It was.
But so now it's Monsters Inc. And Monsters Inc. is a great subject to do for a ride. But here's where, like I say, the fact that they had to fit it around the limo ride, it's not as good, I don't think, as it could have been had you created a monster ride.
Right.
And you would have spent less because you built the limo ride, then you built the monster ride. If you built a good monster ride
right out front.
And so
at the
that's
gate.
why, at the very onset of a project, you come to a why that is where money isn't being spent, and it's still on, it's still on paper, and it's still, we could do this, we could do that. It doesn't cost anything to do it right or do it wrong. You now start marching down that path, and the why keeps widening, and to get it back from wrong is going to cost a lot of money as it moves down the construction path. And so it's so critical at the very beginning to make those right decisions. And that's where it all goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, that you have to be in accordance with all the people that are behind you and you're working with and for, so that they trust you, you trust them, and we're all marching on something. The worst thing you want is to hear your employees going out in the back saying, I don't know, I get we're it's job, and I guess we'll work on it, but man, I don't see why we're doing this. That is the weakest thing in projects like that limo ride. Many people were alerted while it was in early design that it isn't appealing to tourists coming to California for Hollywood, and it's not insider look at Hollywood that all of us wink kind of would have fun at looking behind the scenes. So who's going to like it? Well, I'll work on it. I'll paint the black light. I'll sculpt the figures. Everyone is kind of wrapped into that, and that's the most dangerous path of all. You want everyone saying, I love going to work today. I'm working on this amazing thing. And everyone is going to die when they see what we're doing.